Broadcasting around the world, this is On the Record with Christian Briggs. Serious talk about what's happening around the world and how it affects you. Unfiltered truth for a world on edge. Follow us on X at BMC_HAM. Live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to go into one of the biggest, most controversial areas of how the Cold War has started and how it's transformed, transitioning, and really it's remaking and renaming the assault on America, where it used to be the Eastern European, the Soviet Union used to have the monopoly on the Cold War. Cuba was always a vital part of the Soviet Union, the communists trying to take over the world. Remember the Cuba Missile Crisis? If you haven't heard of that, look it up. It's a big deal back in the early 60s, especially with Kennedy having to stare down Khrushchev. So at the end of the day, we have the same thing. This time it's President Xi. This time it's some of the countries in the Middle East. This time it's internally our own government that people want communism through various ways. But what we have right now is we have a problem. It's called quantum.
Quantum computing is very high potential.
Investors are increasingly asking us about the implications of quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
Political and state level economic support to develop quantum, and we want to be part of that.
Quantum is basically the speed of which you can compute calculations. That is such a basic way of saying it. But at the end of the day, what I want to do is I want to be able to go into the greatest of detail to show how the Cold War has shifted to a technical war. It's called the quantum war. And what we're going to see here now for the very first time, is exactly what it's all about.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but tech companies are competing over developing quantum computers. Google is one of those companies, and as the New York Times reports, Google recently said its machine can run software 13,000 times as fast as a traditional supercomputer.
Today, there aren't practical uses. This is still in the future. This is still technology reaches its promise. It will help with things like drug discovery, so identifying new medicines and new vaccines. It might accelerate the progress of artificial intelligence even further. It can help scientists build new materials for building all sorts of things, whether it's cars or specifically understanding the way that science works, in a sense, physics and chemistry, and building all sorts of new things that can be used.
We're going to break the egg. We're going to put it out there. This is Christian Briggs on the record. And so as we kind of move into the whole understanding of what is quantum, okay, what is the quantum war? Okay, this is something that people need to understand, is that the next Cold War is quantum AI, and it's China's moon strategy and the battle for the future of global power. Whoever achieves quantum, okay, and I'm calling you directly here from Florida, where I spend a lot of time in Florida here, as well as, Puerto Rico, of course. And one of the things I try to do is enlighten people, especially when I have the opportunity to do in person. But a lot of times I'm not as fortunate to have to be with some of the smarter people that would get this. So I try to dumb it down a little bit, not making it too technically high level to where you have to look up the words or the phrases or the understanding, and to be able to get what I'm trying to say here is I'm really trying to make this thing simple as I can for everyone to understand, is that the Cold War never went away. It's just been transformed into almost a fintech war. It's the war about the financial side of what China's trying to do to the dollar. And they're going to try to achieve quantum speed computing so that way they can take over. And then we're going to go into detail here what exactly this is, because this is not good. And so now, remember, the next Cold War will not be fought with tanks. Not even a bullet will be shot, but a button will be pushed. If I ask the average American that will determine who leads the world over the next 50 years, most people would probably give answers rooted in the 20th century. They would talk about military power. They would talk about aircraft carriers. They would even talk about nuclear weapons. And a lot of that would have been true years ago. That was basically the elements of military supremacy: who could build the first nuclear warheads, who could build the first nuclear ships, who could build the first nuclear supersonic, transcontinental, ballistics, intercontinental, all those fancy words, which basically means I can blow you up first. That's what it means. So What I want to do is talk more about what used to be the Cold War, the armies, the missiles, and defense budgets. Those things still do matter. They matter enormously, but they are no longer the entire story. In fact, if you look at what we're starting to work on, these AI data centers, why are we pumping in trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions over the next 3 to 5 years globally? Well, the next Cold War is already underway, okay? But it is being fought on battlefields that most people cannot see. It is being fought inside the semiconductor fabrication plants, okay? The NVIDIA chips, the Intel chips, the Broadcom chips, all the things of which create an environment of super connectivity. In other words, high speed, transactional high speed computing. In fact, you've got the CPUs, the GPUs. Now we're working on the QPUs, which is the quantum chips, okay? We are trying to build a system that can calculate trillions of instances or trillions of different problems to solve within a trillionth of a second, thus cracking the ultimate code. But before I get to exactly what that means, know this. China, during the Biden administration, when he was able to be blackmailed, he was able to be extorted by China for two things. One, to get out of Afghanistan so China can get some of the rare resources of Afghanistan. That's why he was given 30 days because he was told to do it. And if he didn't, then more corruption would have been exposed by China. Two, he was told, we're going to build a moon base on the far side. You're not going to do anything about it. We're going to extract helium-3. We're going to also extract other lunar surface resources. And we probably will put a couple nuclear weapons up there too. And what are you going to do about it? Nothing, because you're corrupted. You're compromised. And so China was able to get those two things, which were really critical for them to maintain a consistent foothold in the progressive forward movement of trying to undermine the United States financial system by various ways. And quantum is one of them. So let's talk about that. Quantum laboratories. Before I go into how far down the road China is, let's talk about quantum factories, laboratories, and the factories of which are trying to create quantum. Okay. It is being fought in data centers. It is being fought in payment systems. And perhaps, and most importantly, it is being fought in the race to control the technologies that will define the next century. What you have to realize is these data centers and government, whether it's state or local or on the federal level, whether it's China or us, they are pouring in hundreds of billions of dollars because they know one thing. The biggest national security policy that we can face right now, and the policy is we've got to become first and foremost number one to achieve quantum. History teaches a very simple lesson. The nations that dominate the defining technologies, okay, of an era tend to dominate the era itself, okay? Remember when Britain became the dominant power of the 19th century? Because it mastered industrialization before its competitors. That was a big deal. The United States became the dominant power of the 20th century because it mastered mass production, aviation, and of course, electronics and computing and nuclear technology before anywhere else, okay? Anywhere or anyone at any time. We built the nuclear atom bomb, which we obviously used it twice on Japan in World War II. Systematically, the next generation, we went from plutonium to uranium, and the next generation of nuclear weapons and nuclear energy for that matter. So the Soviet Union was feared not because of its ideology, but because it had achieved nuclear parity with the United States. Remember that. So as we moved forward and everybody was worried about Soviet Union, the problem was it wasn't their armaments as far as the tanks and the guns and the bullets and the men. It was having parity of nuclear weapons with the United States, thus the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, look it up. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, I think it was, or 61. It's when Kennedy was president and he had to stare down Khrushchev, who at the time was the leader of the Soviet Union, who had been a very famous World War II general, had a huge amount of respect. He took over after Stalin passed away. Big guy, tough guy. Didn't really seem like he was going to back down on that. We were probably within 2 to 3 minutes of a nuclear, whatever you want to call it, annihilation of each other, probably. So as the countries that had innovated faster and they scale faster and deploy faster always eventually accumulate the economic and military advantages, that becomes extraordinarily difficult to overcome. In other words, what I'm saying is once you achieve a milestone in military And whatever that is, whether it's the air, it's the sea, it's the land, or a combination of all three, or if it's nuclear weapons that can control all three of those elements, you've achieved supremacy. And military supremacy can easily mean fiscal, okay, monetary supremacy. If you have monetary supremacy first, a lot of times that can be the foothold to garner the strength and the positioning and sometimes the dictatorship of something. But the military has always been one of those deals where you really want the military to be on your side first and foremost, because if anything does go sideways, they seem to help. It's kind of like they have the biggest gun in the room. And so for decades, Americans assumed technological leadership was a natural birthright. I know. I mean, I thought that many times, that the United States had a natural right to lead because it was always deemed to be the ultimate superpower, okay? We built Silicon Valley. We invented the microprocessor, okay? Look at Intel, 1970. We led the internet revolution, and we even created the modern software industry that we know today. Go to California, go to Arizona, go to Texas, huge semiconductor plants, okay? Remember that. And we even pioneered artificial intelligence research. Here's one area, though, that I got to say. China, in the terms of AI, okay, artificial intelligence and quantum, has poured hundreds of billions of dollars into an area that only recently has President Trump put $2 billion behind quantum.
The Trump administration has announced it will invest $2 billion in 9 quantum computing firms.
The Trump administration taking stake in select quantum computing firms.
That entire ecosystem of quantum computing stocks like Rigetti and D-Wave all moving higher on the back of that news.
Really strong optimism on this quantum computing sector.
These investments will not be grants or contracts to buy from these firms. They will be equity stakes in the frontier technology of harnessing quantum physics to build an entire new form of computing. Something talked about and researched for years, but that has remained stubbornly on the horizon. IBM by itself will receive half of the government investment.
Which is a white paper that I wrote about 4 or 5 months ago saying, and spelling out, and I got it over to the White House and members of Congress saying, we have to put money behind private enterprise to achieve quantum before China. And 4 months later, well, we did. So I was happy about that. That made me feel good because all the things of which I've written or put forth for consideration has and for the most part been implemented, or at least certainly many of the ideas of the solutions to the cause, the effects, and then the solutions which help mitigate risk or mitigate downside consequences of various policies have been not only talked to but have been executed on, and I love that. So. I want to say a big thanks to Senator Groves of California for pushing that over to members of the administration. I do appreciate that. She's a wonderful California legislator and a big fan of President Trump, so that's good. And Assemblyman Stan Ellis, of course, of California. That's the rock star people. With that said, for decades, and I want to make sure this is clear, I'm going to repeat something that I said earlier. If we do what we need to do fundamentally and to achieve quantum, we will win the race, period. There is no other race. But we still got a long ways to go because here's why. See, for decades, and I've done it, Americans had assumed technical leadership, again, was what? A natural birthright. Okay? We may have built the first microprocessor. We may have built the understanding of what social integration of intelligence is through Facebook and all of that. That's what it is. It's social integration through intelligence, right? That's how you merge people. Oh, I connect to this guy. Oh my God, there's a friend over there. Oh my gosh, here we are. Okay, think about that. We lead from the front. China copies from the rear. Then they try to work backwards and re-engineer things, which have been very successful at that, by the way. I mean, think about this. We landed men on the moon for the first time. We developed stealth aircraft. To this day is the world's most advanced military systems, okay? I want to make sure we're clear about that. For most of the post-war era, technological superiority was simply assumed. We assumed it. We took for granted. We took entitlements. We're entitled people here, okay? Because we're a wealthy country and we sometimes think these things are natural gifts or natural birthrights, like I said earlier, but they're not. Yet these assumptions for all intents and purposes, can be extremely dangerous. And when we think like this, we overthink. I've always said, watch the Dallas Cowboys. Love that team. Love Jerry Jones. Love the coaches that he's had for 30 years. Great coaches. He's a great general manager. He's a great owner. But sometimes the players reflect leadership, and they get a little bit overconfident in that third and fourth quarter. And I'm not saying that they've done it every time, but they've missed a few opportunities to close the deal, right? To get to the playoffs or get to the Super Bowl. It's been overconfidence, and we're all guilty of it, okay? So I'm not just saying Dallas Cowboys. I'm saying we're all like that. It's just Cowboys, a couple games I remember watching the playoffs. It's like, oh, they were up 3 touchdowns, and what just happened? Who knows? But at the end of the day, they didn't win those games. And it may not have been the players overzealous, it may not have been the leadership, but that's sometimes how it works. We get overzealous as individuals. We get to the point where maybe ego gets a little bit ahead of the reality of the situation. You understand that is that we build these things, we do these things, we accomplish these things. Well, Americans enjoyed, and I say this, the fruits of our technological leadership, okay, and they did. China spent decades studying how that leadership was built. They studied our success. They looked inside. They said, was it academics? Was it just natural born instinct of intelligence? Or was it both and plus mechanical? Was it systems of which that would enhance our overall knowledge and the speed to technically deliver on applications that would keep us in the lead in every category of business and military? And whatever it was, they found it. And over time, what began as an effort to catch up evolved into an effort to lead. And now they're leading in new areas. And I'll give you examples. So this competition of quantum, which whoever achieves quantum computing will achieve global superiority. Understand, it's not a maybe, it's a guarantee. The technologies that will likely determine global power in the 21st century are no longer theoretical. Artificial intelligence is already transforming industries. Advanced semiconductors have become strategic assets. Quantum computing is moving from laboratory curiosity toward practical capabilities. You understand that?
Google's Willow chip achieved something that should be impossible. It completed a calculation in 5 minutes that would take the world's fastest supercomputer 10 to the 25th power years to solve. That's 10 septillion years. IBM just unveiled their roadmap to 200 logical qubits by 2029 and 100,000 qubits by 2033. Microsoft demonstrated 24 entangled logical qubits, a record. Amazon launched their first quantum chip.
Practical capabilities, robotics, autonomous systems, biotechnology, and advanced materials are all accelerating simultaneously. Okay? The nation that integrates, listen to me, that integrates these technologies the most effectively will gain advantages measured not in percentages, but in orders of magnitude. That's massive, okay? So I'm trying to tell you, it's the magnitude of the success of these type of protocols, these accomplishments and applications into speed of computing will literally run the world, and we'll be locked out of everything and put into a digital slave type scenario. We'll just be in a prison where everything is now controlled by a centralized Chinese power.
The Chinese government committed $140 billion to quantum development.
That is why governments around the world are increasingly treating technological development as a matter of the highest level of national security rather than merely economic growth. And I know this for a fact because what I'm reading right now is the paper that I wrote on quantum.
It's going to destroy encryption, and it's going to destroy current levels of encryption and cybersecurity. So I think there's a whole new opportunity in the cybersecurity space as a result of what quantum could ultimately do, right? And you got to think about financial institutions, you got to think about the exchanges, all their security.
Okay, and this is what I'm going to share to the public, but certainly not what there's way more to this. And unfortunately, I will not be sharing this with the public in the details I would like to. So you just have to wait for part 2. But right now, let's keep on going because I'll tell you something. So let's talk a little bit about China and what they're developing, a new class of weapons and cyber tools based on quantum technology. Okay, so China has been developing a class of weapons and cyber tools make no mistake, and they're based on quantum technology, and it's to offset traditional United States military advantages. If you look at the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, which is normally what it's called, PLA, it is actively testing over 10 experimental quantum cyber warfare tools for frontline missions. Make no mistake about it, okay? Quantum radar, prototype systems, these are unbelievable. I'm going to go into some detail here that I wasn't going to really talk a little bit about because I don't want to scare people, okay? It's not like it's classified, but I want to scare people in the understanding of just how far they have come, okay? Quantum radar, prototype systems are being developed that utilize quantum entanglement to detect stealth aircraft. So all these aircrafts we've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on to be what? Unnoticed, okay? Camouflaged by normal radar systems. These guys in China, I don't know how to say this, but they cracked that code. They have literally cracked that code of how to determine is that a foe or a friend. And when it's fully operational, which is soon, they could be achieved this in the next 18 to 36 months. This could totally neutralize the entire invisibility currently, okay? And currently, that is part of the U.S. most advanced and allied stealth fighters by far. This isn't just binary stuff. This is real world national security stuff. Okay. It's not like we have it, they have it, they kind of have it, we kind of, no, they are closer to it by at least 2 years than we are. Okay. And then when you look at quantum cyber warfare, which is one of the highest, I mean, that's even probably worse than anything because what you can get inside the systems and the speed of which redo the password so they can't even tell that the passwords were done. They can't even tell they're in there because they can change all the makeup. They can literally rewrite the code of whatever antivirus software is in our systems and basically say, oh, no, we're not here. We're actually part of the system. And that's happened. Trust me when I tell you, there are times that China has gotten into our water supply, our healthcare, our Social Security, our Department of Defense at the time, the military. I mean, they went in everywhere. They grabbed stuff. They've not only got into some of our best, most top secret classified material for weapons and aircraft, aeronautics, aerospace, all these things. And we didn't know they were in there for months and months. They were digging around, grabbing this stuff. So when I say quantum cyber warfare, I'm not joking. China is working on tools that extract the highest value of military intelligence from public cyberspace and companies, both private and government, and utilize quantum computing to process the largest amounts of battlefield data in milliseconds. They're in there downloading an entire native server, okay, like an agentic AI server, the next generation stuff. They can do it so fast that you blink and trillions of instances and commands will have been done under the quantum speed, okay? They'll know it all. Satellite technology is in development. This is scary here because this is quantum sensing, okay? This is actual satellite technology is in development aimed at piercing cloud, smoke, camouflage with absolute clarity. Like it doesn't even exist. There is no more density of camouflage where you're under either smoke or a physical, like buildings, even for that matter. They can get through all that stuff. Secure communications, they've already built systems for quantum communications, quantum data transfer. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. They have already built extensive quantum key distribution called the QKD. Remember that. You should look all this stuff up. I wrote this stuff. Okay, I've researched it. I've written this stuff. I've published this stuff. I've made this available to tons of people, both in academics and in DC. And let me tell you something. When you start to look at how the key distribution is going to work under extensive quantum key distribution, which is called QKD, networks and theoretically making military and government communications immune to conventional hacking. Like they can make their communications unbreakable. Like, in other words, you can't listen to them. You can't redirect it. You can't follow it. Okay. So I call it the strategic race. It is. It's the strategic race. Analysts that I've talked to, and I've talked to several of them, okay? And I've also looked at tons of white papers. I mean, I've got so much white papers that come out of my ears that I've read on this. And despite the rapid progress, the technology remains in its infancy stages in some areas, but not all of them. Once we start to realize that they've had more hundreds of billions of dollars, okay, more money thrown at this from state-sponsored development and research compared to our peanuts in $10, compared to what they've spent, you have to think that they're at least ahead, whether it's 2 days or 2 years, by the sheer determination and how good they are at this stuff, and by the money they've thrown at it. And they don't waste money. These guys are paid this, they'll do this, they'll execute on this, and that's the way it is. They will deliver. What is Trump trying to do to make sure that we achieve it before he leaves office?
To most of us, $2 billion sounds like a lot of money. But when you compare that with some of the investments being made right now in AI,
yes.
I mean, $850 billion. So is this priming the pump for investors? Is this a way of the government saying, we're willing to invest, and that will encourage other investors to come in?
I think the reason that why $2 billion is nothing is what's going to take. Just go through the development cycles. When they talk about a hybrid model for quantum, right, what they're talking about is marrying this quantum advantage, the technology, to the traditional approaches, which is cloud and AI. But it's not commercial computing, right? It doesn't have what you need to make this thing a robust commercial system. The data management, memory management, backup and recovery, all the things you expect, right? Accuracy of your answers and things like that, that you expect if you're running a hospital or a bank or whatever it happens to be. I don't think is going to be there in 2 to 3 years. I mean, they're working on it like crazy, but I think this thing's got a way to go from a financial perspective. So $2 billion, I mean, it's a start, but it's certainly not going to be the finish.
We're going to take a break right now, and we're going to come back. It's going to get real good, because what I'm going to do now is go into part 2, and let's talk about applications. What does it really mean for the average person if they do achieve it? Is that even possible? So stay tuned. We'll be right back for commercial break.
On the Record with Christian Briggs will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Gold has more than tripled since September 2022, rising from $1,656 per ounce to over $5,000 by February 2026. That's a 205% gain, outperforming the market, and proving why gold is the ultimate long-term hedge. As global debt soars and currencies weaken, central banks are hoarding gold at record pace. Why aren't you? Call 844-426-4653 or visit bmcham.com. Protect your future with real assets. Own gold now.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there for part 2. This is going to be really where we dive in way more details, because what people don't realize is what quantum can achieve. It's not just transferring money or data. This thing will revolutionize every aspect of society. And whoever can do that, again, wins the last and final race. And if it's a tie, that's not bad, not good, but not bad. But if it's not a tie and we seem to be behind, we'll never be leading from the front again. And then Kung Pao shrimp may be like a daily meal.
积聚力量，进行原创性、引领性科技攻关。坚决打赢关键核心技术攻坚战。
China are betting big. They've invested over $15 billion, more than 3 times any other country. They have dozens of new research institutes committed to quantum and hold more than half of all patents in quantum technology.
The viability of quantum is 100%. It's going to be achieved. There's no question. They're already working on QPUs, which are quantum chips, to be able to be put into the systems that would run the artificial intelligence software. Quantum is the hardware. It basically defines the speed in which the calculations are derived. And the speed is 4 quadrillionth at a time, like 4 quadrillionth instances, like commands. It's a number that does not have ability to really understand. We don't, unless you see it in the real environment, at least in testing. So among all these technologies, none may more prove itself consequentially than quantum just computing. The term gets thrown around constantly, okay? I've done it. Other people have done it because I talk to people who know it fully and understand it. So it sounds like it's now become like pass the butter or pass the salt. but it is exceedingly important to understand that it is the final battle. It's the final frontier for achieving what the United States once was, which was the number one dollar or currency, the dollar, the number one reserve asset. Everybody looked to us for leadership. Everybody looked to us for protection. Everybody looked for us as opportunity. And now China with the Briggs nations and their quantum race, they're getting a lot of traction. A lot of people are looking to them now to replace the United States for different reasons. And if they achieve quantum, it'll be achieved. But we can't let that happen. So the term gets thrown out a lot. But at the end of the day, very few people truly understand what makes it so important. So I'll break it down. Most technological advances improve existing capabilities. That's a fact. If you have faster processors like from Broadcom or Intel, they are going to make computers faster. Okay. Better batteries make devices last longer. Improved networks move data more efficiently. Quantum computing is completely different. Quantum computing changes what is possible based on certain calculations that would take traditional supercomputers thousands, millions, or even billions of years to complete, and could potentially be solved in dramatically shorter periods of time using a sufficiently advanced quantum systems. Let me say this again. The difference between quantum and the fastest supercomputer, the amount of calculations that quantum can do, true quantum, okay, it's a certain speed, and we'll get there. I just hope China doesn't get there first. It'll render a supercomputer, the fastest computer we have now, which is so fast, at least we think it's fast, until the next faster one is shown, that the quantum can do what the fastest supercomputer currently available would take 1 billion years. In other words, the extreme speed of the fastest quantum that we could think we can achieve, those calculations in that period, super fast. Like it's the fastest we can possibly conceive right now that we can think we can ever get to, which may not be but a couple of years away. Those many calculations would take the fastest current supercomputer 1.6 billion years to achieve. So that means is, if China achieves quantum first, they can change the passwords by allowing the system to go through every possible mechanical number, combination, or sequence of numbers, and be able to unlock every single code, whether it's numbers, letters, passwords, phrases, and then all of a sudden it's in, and in the same instant it gets in, it changes the passwords, and it can change those passwords billions of times per day. Billions. We would never be able to keep up. When I say it's something so important, it is the ultimate national security risk we have is not to achieve it.
How important is it for the US to be the leaders in this?
It's critically important. I think that is recognized in a bipartisan manner. One of the things we're witnessing is that we've seen the elevation of technology to the same level of geostrategic importance as trade or military alliances. Quantum computing is without a doubt one of the top technologies that the United States needs to lead.
Let's talk about more stuff. So when you take all of this, it's not just simply faster computer. It is the ultimate speed. And so the implications extend to cybersecurity, crypto, logistics, artificial intelligence, pharmaceutical development, materials science, financial modeling, intelligence collection, and military planning, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's everything. It's everything. They'll literally control every aspect, every part of business. Now, quantum computing is not yet at the point where it can routinely perform all this tasks. Not yet. That's the race. China is probably 18 to 24 months ahead of us because of the amount of time and the amount of money they put forth. It's amazing how much it is. I mean, it's so much money. So we put $2 billion, they put $165 billion. So again, and they've had 4 years advance to gain, but they didn't have a lot of stuff. They had to steal stuff, and then they had to reverse engineer it. Then they had to re-engineer it to a forward-looking rather than a reverse-looking. So it became a leading asset rather than a kind of an old asset, like in a chip or even some of the other pieces of which the systems need for quantum success, right? Because you got to have, it's all based on hardware. Quantum is hardware. Artificial intelligence is what runs on the quantum. Much of the media coverage exaggerates current capabilities, but this, in my opinion, misses the larger point, which is strategic competition is not about what quantum computers can do today is about what they may be capable of doing tomorrow, next week, next month, next quarter. And so every major government superpower understands this, okay? It's not just about the United States that understands it. Trust me, I tell you, China gets it, because China started way before we did in the manner in which that they are. But again, they didn't have a lot of the systems to work in, so they had to try to steal what they could, but their efforts started to achieve quantum years and years ago. But thank God they didn't have quite the leg up or the advancement at the time. Otherwise, they would have probably achieved it, maybe possibly even by now. I hate to think that, but it's possible they could have done it. But they didn't have those things. So they're playing catch up to a point, but they may now be 2 years ahead on parts of achieving full quantum, certainly in data and communications transfers. And Europe gets it, Japan gets it. Governments are investing hundreds of billions now because they recognize that, like I said earlier, and I'll say it again, whoever reaches practical quantum advantage may gain the kind of strategic leverage that nuclear weapons of the Cold War, because I said it's a different type of war, provided during the 20th century. Understand that if you achieve quantum, you're the only one who has nuclear weapons at the time. And we may never have a second country or a second anybody have quantum, because once you achieve it, you can prevent anybody else from getting it. So you'd have the only nuclear weapons in existence. So they affect every sector of the economy simultaneously if they achieve this, okay? This is a fact. One of the most widely discussed implications involves encryption. I've said this for 3 years. This was highly, highly important. Virtually every secure digital system on Earth relies on encryption. It's various numbers, right? 256 and all the way up. Military communications rely on a very advanced encryption system. But like financial transactions rely on extremely high sophisticated encryption systems. But governments and networks rely on this. Corporate intellectual property relies on very sophisticated encryption systems. But the internet itself depends on encryptions, okay? Encryption for all the security and safety reasons, right? Come on. Modern civilization is built on the assumption that certain mathematical problems are difficult enough that even powerful computers cannot solve them within useful time frames. So there's always a measure of speed, no different than someone chasing somebody. But the fact is that we always say we'll be able to have the time it needs in order to be able to fix the problem. We've always said that. We've always been egotistically driven to believe that that's always going to be the case. But quantum computing threatens that assumption. Okay, it's completely different. In fact, let me say this to you, and this is just my thoughts here. If the moment sufficiently comes and capable quantum systems emerge out of China, many existing encryption standards become vulnerable. You understand? I'm keeping this very layman's. So what that means is information that is secure today will not be secure tomorrow. It's over. Intelligence agencies around the world are acutely aware of this, trust me. CIA, NSA, MI6, Mossad, everybody knows, FSB, everybody knows that this possibility, which is why the phrase harvest now, decrypt later, has become increasingly common in strategic circles. Adversaries may even be collecting encrypted information today with the expectation that future quantum capabilities will eventually unlock it. That's scary. So the people who hate us, that are jealous of us, want to destroy our way of life, our whole way of thinking, the way we live, our society, our culture, they have. I'm not saying that I said the word may, and I say that it may have all, no, they have a ton of it, but they may have more than we know. And once they achieve quantum, they can unlock all of those different encrypted files, okay? That's scary, and it's about as scary as it gets. So this is where the conversation moves from technologically into national security, right? Think about that. Think about that. Imagine a world where one nation develops practical quantum decryption before its rivals. That nation could potentially and would read communications that others assume are still secure. It's not maybe, they'll do it. I would do it. If I was the United States, I achieved quantum, hell yeah, I'm going to want to know what all these crazies out there are doing today. Is North Korea wanting to launch nuclear missiles? How do we know if they've ever thought about it? Let's go and boom, let's go in the back end. Let's encrypt those files. Let's read their stuff. We can do it. We can listen on their phones with quantum. We can do anything we want, go anywhere we want, and then have all the fruits of the labor of everybody in anything they've ever done at the fingertips. That's quantum. That's quantum capabilities. So that nation, that us, United States, or it could be China, that could potentially read all of these things, could literally change the course of humanity. Okay. I mean, they would gain complete visibility. I've said this the other day to somebody, and I want to make it very clear. They could gain all the visibility they need into military planning. Think about that. Diplomatic negotiations, all the financial transactions, and intelligence operations, everything. They could be so in the system for all of that. They could be inside the CIA, NSA system, reading emails in real time, listening to conversations, gaining the foothold on every single secret meeting or dialogue or communications in writing. How they can run that back. Such an advantage would not simply be valuable. It will be transformative, and transformation is not what we want China to succeed on. Okay. The nation processing it could take milliseconds to make decisions based on information that was never, could, would, should ever be available to anybody else. You could block it all. You could block it. Throughout history, okay, think about this. Throughout history, information advantages have often, in many cases, determined, in my opinion, outcomes long before the conflicts even begin. Think about that. You know, whenever war or whenever there was a strategic military operation, so early planning was very important to that. But with quantum, you could run every scenario of every single potential thing that can happen in a millisecond, and you could then determine which of those are the most viable before anybody even picks up a gun. Okay, your enemies. Quantum computing introduces the possibility of information asymmetrics on a scale never previously imagined. Okay, that's end game. That's what it is. And so, and I'm going to go in more detail.